Welcome to the Oshow. I'm Laura Babcock, and just when I was starting to think that maybe the Greenbelt Scandal was slowing down at least, no, not the case. This past week, there has been story after story, revelation after revelation, investigation after investigation from some great journalists. And on top of the Greenbelt revelations, we've also got the super mega spa 99-year secret deal for Ontario Place. Who needs a spa at Ontario Place, especially one that's going to cut down trees for a surface parking lot on the waterfront? And we've got to get the panel back together to talk about it. The Greenbelt Scandal panel.
The opposition New Democrats have dubbed this Greenbelt 2.0, and I think that's pretty accurate, actually. I think perhaps Premier Ford's big reversal and climb down on, we're going to put all those Greenbelt lands we took out, we're going to put them back in, take no more out. That's the end of that. I think that did a lot as far as, toning down the heat on the scandal, taking it way, way down. And then we've realized that on the same day that they took those lands out last November, those Greenbelt lands, they also, of course, and we knew this, we've been learning more and more about it, that they expanded the boundaries of Hamilton, Ottawa, Waterloo, several other municipalities, and in some cases, as in Hamilton's, against the wishes of the city council, against the recommendations of their own civil servants, against the city's staff, against the wishes of the local people who said, because most of it in the Hamilton case is like 90% of it's prime farmland. Then we found out that those lands that were included or forced inside Hamilton's boundaries and Ottawa's boundaries and others were requested by third parties, again, unidentified third parties, maybe Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z. I don't know what the Integrity Commissioner referred to as Mr. X. Apparently, there's other lobbyists out there who've been very, very successful at getting what they want in backroom deals, it seems, from this progressive conservative government, because none of us heard about this. The government itself, their own staff said, the Indigenous groups that you didn't consult are opposed to this. We're opposed to it. The environmental group is basically everyone is opposed to this, including the cities that you're doing it to, the municipalities, and yet you're going to plow right ahead and do it. And again, these third parties who have requested these things, it just smacks more of the same type that the original did with the ministerial zoning orders and backroom deals. It just, it's a good thing Zoom and Skype and these don't have smell-o-vision, because the stink is still permeating up from this. And the Greenbelt thing, I think they're right to call it 2.0. Okay, he apologized for the first part, putting that back. I think we've got to push now on the second part and get that. Again, it was done the same day. This was all the same project, really, this whole rush thing. So if the process for the Greenbelt lands, which the Premier now admits was terrible, flawed, unfair, all these things, well, how can the rest of the process for the other land on the same day be okay? And they're not being put back in. The government was very concerned. Minister Calandra, the new housing minister, was no, we're not reversing course on that. So why they're sticking to their guns on this is kind of unclear, but it does not in any way lessen the impact of the Greenbelt scandal. And now that the legislature's adjourned for a week, they'll be back, on the 16th with the bill promised to put the Greenbelt lands back in. But in that week, do you think the opposition parties and the journalists are going to be doing some more digging and digging? My God, the Narwhals piece yesterday was a 16-minute read just to explain all of this. So yeah. I had to quickly summarize here an awful lot of it. So there's way more. If you really want detail, there's a lot to be had. And the Narwhal, the Star, all the other journalists are doing some great work on this. But it's very complicated in one sense. But in the stand back and look at it sense, it just seems more stuff we're not being told about. And yet we find out later through court documents, because there's lawsuits in these cases against some of these moves. Why is the government so non-transparent? I mean, it's just completely opaque on this. Same as the Ontario Place deal, the Highway 413, all these things. It's all cumulative, but it comes right back to the Greenbelt. This Greenbelt 2.0, I think, is going to stick around.
Well said. And the roots of the Greenbelt scandal are deep and the branches stretch wide and far. And when we had Merritt Stiles, the leader of the opposition, the Ontario NDP, on the program just recently, she certainly talked about the fact that there was more to come. And so they are continuing to pursue, from a legislative point of view, getting to the bottom of some of these things, right?
One of the things that stuck with me is that I feel like we're living in, early England, where there are kings and they are granting land or granting wealth to their friends, and the rest of us are just lowly little serfs to to, bow down to these, and this is what it feels like. I honestly feel like when you read the story after story and the people that are connected, and, I know all these people because they were the same people that came knocking on the door when we were there, and when I was in government, asking for the same lands to be removed, trying to hire anybody and everybody to, see if they could break through. We held the line on them. And my guess is that, I think, to be fair, I mean, in the last part of the Liberal government, they did a lot of things that really impacted the development community. And I think the developers, once Ford was in, they were like, you know what, here's our time, here's our chance, here's our opportunity to get everything, get all the spoils that we've been waiting for. So that's kind of what, I think. The other thing that I think came out this week that not a lot of people are talking about, and we should talk about more, is the fact that Ontario is on track to build way less homes this year than even last year. And this is no secret. I mean, I've said this on your show earlier this year. The people that I know in the development community have told me projects are on hold. We are not building. The conditions right now are not good for building homes. We can't make a profit, right? So let's get to the very nature. I mean, no. I don't want. Obviously, developers need to make a profit, right? I mean, this is, I'm the least socialist person around, but they don't do any of this out of the goodness of their heart. And what's been happening is all of this is nothing more than land banking. It's legacy building. And if I were the Mayor Horvath, she's going to get some teeth now and start getting into this game. I know this sounds really, really like bad advice, okay? But I would just say no.
Yeah.
No. We are not going to give permits to any of properties that are in these lands that have been pulled in and force Doug Ford, Paul Calandra to usurp the will of the public, to physically, and literally force them. And then we will see who benefits, right? I mean, that's where I think we're gonna get the big exposure. So for my part, I think in the next little while, this is not going to go away. We're going to get to the point where maybe the government feels that people are going to get tired of talking about this, and and then at least we'll have these urban boundary expansions that we have granted to our loyal subjects, our loyal donors.
Those who do fundraisers for them, they're feudal lords, yes.
Feudal lords,
exactly. Who host them at their castles, right, and raise money for them. Yeah.
One of them actually lives in a castle in Casper. So
I know, this is what I'm saying, right?
Exactly.
Your analogy is spot on, Mark. It's spot on.
People are really angry about a whole lot of issues right now. In particular, they're really angry about having to go to the grocery store and seeing, overall inflation may be down, but it still looks like 9-10% or more in the grocery store. The gas pump, same situation. People, let alone people who, gave up the dream of ever owning a home or getting a place to rent without a roommate, all those sorts of things. People are angry, rightly so, I think, to some degree, and they see a government that, claims to be for the little people, and all we see is the rich getting richer. The people playing the system, whatever the system, maybe they haven't done anything illegal, but the system here looks rigged to the rest of us, that only those that donate to the party, host the party fundraiser, or go to all the fundraisers, go to the premier's events, they seem to be the ones that are benefiting the most, while the rest of us are struggling like hell. They're the premier's got a real love on for Shoppers Drug Mart and Loblaw.
Right.
Well, good God. They won't even allow a Dollarama to sell bread if it's in a building they own, and they own most of the darn things because they're also a huge real estate corporation. After being convicted of fixing the price of bread, the same corporation won't allow competition in bread, a basic thing, when people are literally afraid to go to the grocery store right now. So this is not a time for a government to be cozying up, and yet it's exactly what they're doing, cozying up to Galen Weston. I mean, to get a Presto card for a senior, you can't buy it from the TTC. You have to go to Shoppers and give them $6.
We just did a show on the privatization of healthcare in Ontario.
Oh my gosh.
And what's happening with the long-term care homes? One of the first things that Ford did was make it so that people couldn't sue these long-term care homes, right? And that's
Here's where they have a chance to really take some ground here. These new medical clinics that have popped up using nurse practitioners who aren't governed by the Canada Health Act. Essentially, it means they can charge for services normally covered under OHIP. They're charging annual fees, $400, $1,000, this sort of thing. It's clearly a loophole that no one else but the private sector saw and moved right in very, very quickly. There's a bunch of these things opening up. Here's where the Ford government has a chance to show people. Because right now they're kind of floundering. The health minister, who's usually missing in action for most things, came out and said, we're looking at it. We don't want loopholes. But are they going to agree that this is a loophole? Are they going to agree this is somewhere the private sector is going to help us shorten those waiting lists or whatever nonsense we don't need to hear? If they're going to stick, this is one chance where they have to sort of get people back on their side. We're not going just for the rich to get richer. We're not going for the corporations. I mean, now that Monty McNaughton's gone, is it just okay to heck with it? We're all just going back to being on the side of the boss only?
Maybe that's why Monty McNaughton left, because he maybe saw the direction that this government was going to go with its public-facing messaging.
A great little short example of this that I saw yesterday posted online, it's about Ontario Place, but it's the same thing. It's all this government acting in secret, a 95-year secret lease where we're going to cut down 800 trees, but we're going to plant some new ones on the roof if you want to walk up there and have a look at them. Davy Tree posted yesterday, hey, we ain't bidding on that. Get us, no, we got nothing to do with Ontario Place. A tree company is reading the room better than the progressive conservative government. They're literally running a tree company and saying, hey, no, we're not cutting those trees down. We've got nothing to do. I'm sure it'd be some good money in cutting down 800 trees for them. They're just literally going, nah, not us. Thank you. Goodbye.
And the Premier had the audacity. Let's talk about Ontario Place for a second, because I do think this crosses, right? Cross
bold thinking, his bold thinking.
Well, the Premier did say that, Ontario Place isn't just for Toronto, so hush, hush, Toronto opposition. It's all of Ontario. And I responded to that tweet. Well, speaking for someone outside of Toronto, nobody wants you to cut down trees to pave a parking lot on the waterfront, nor do we want a spa at a time when we can't find frickin' places to rent. So this secret deal, even with a company that now we're finding out the VP sits on the board of TV Ontario, how does that work? We're finding out like they're actual kind of COVID deniers. It's all about getting more vitamin D. They've got videos out with these morons making these kind of deleterious public health statements. These are the guys we're doing a 99 secret deal with, paving a parking lot, cutting down trees on a precious waterfront on Ontario Place. There's no one in Ontario who thinks that's a good use of Ontario Place. Who's going to go to this freaking spa, right? Like it's a gift to the elite. With what are the connections we're going to find out now between Therm and Ford? There's already talk of possible connection. I mean, so it looks as though they've gotten to a point where they're absolutely going for it. They're shameless. They're not apologizing. The corruption runs deep. And maybe that is why good people left and are leaving. And how many more? So let me go to you on this, Mark. How do these conservative MPPs, between the Ontario Place deal, the 413, the land grabs in Ottawa and Hamilton, the Greenbelt Scandal, and the discussing the cash trips to Vegas for joint massage sessions, I mean, how do they keep their head up this Thanksgiving at the dinner table? Like, I can't imagine wanting to be near a brand for what? So that they someday can get their piece of feudal land. Like, what the hell are they doing there?
Well, the fake populist hood has been removed, right? So they won on fake populism in 2008 or 18, sorry, and and the Greenbelt. I would say this issue alone lifted the lid off of the fake populism, where now the blue collar workers, the ones Monty lined up, all those people who said, you know what, Ford's for the little guy, Ford's for the little guy, that has been completely exposed as false. And when you connect the dots, Greenbelt, land grab, rich people, Ontario Place redevelopment for rich people, privatization of long-term care for rich people. Everything they do now is you can see it quite clearly that all of their policy decisions are rooted in rewarding elite stakeholders, making the rich richer, and giving them, it's like building a foundation and it's almost like they know that they're probably going to lose the next election, or they're going to be their time is running out, right? So you've got people jumping ship. What are they going to do? They're going to give even more out before they leave, before they're finally exposed in an election. Yeah. And that's what keeps striking me, is that like where's the stuff for the little guy? Right. Where is the policy decisions for the little guy? No little guy was going to live in the Greenbelt in a McMansion. No little guy is going to be able to afford to go to some swanky spa at Ontario Place. Like, where's the policy for the little guy? We have people in the freaking streets living in tents. If you are a populist and if you are for the little guy, how about we start there? How about we build homes for homeless people? Like, we live in, it's a bizarro world. Like, I don't anything coming from them that's for the little guy.
And so if I can on that, because as soon as we touch into the homeless crisis, it makes me bananas angry. I mean, they removed rent controls, right?
Yeah.
Which incredibly harmed so many people, like absolutely harmed people. They're afraid to leave their places. They're getting their rents jacked up. They've got no way to fight it. They're ending up on the streets. I mean, there's a reason homelessness is increasing. It has to do with the policy to make renting unaffordable, right? Which is often a transition before people can ever enter the housing market. So they've made the homeless crisis far worse by doing that. And then they deprive municipalities by giving developers a break, right? And so now municipalities who are struggling to find some sort of housing solutions for people who are living on the streets are now getting less money because of another decision by them, right? And then they made it so that you couldn't litigate against long-term care malpractice. And we saw 5,000-6,000 people die in long-term care homes, much of it preventable because this government didn't do inspections and did not care. And now we're seeing with these land deals, one of the things we haven't mentioned is there was a talking points memo that came out that was leaked by a bureaucrat this week that detailed their response. Yeah, they didn't talk to Indigenous communities. Oh, well, they weren't planning to, right? Like, there is an absolute lack of giving a shit about anyone other than Conservative Party donors. And I don't think we've seen anything quite this egregious ever. I mean, I'm thinking about some stories from former premiers back in the day, nothing like this, where policy after policy after policy after policy seems meant to be punitive, meant to take power away from municipalities, meant to further put people into poverty while they do a fire sale for the wealthy. And, for the unions, you brought up last time, Keith, that Monty was helpful in getting the private sector unions to think that Ford was for the little guy. Well, that's gone now. You've got the public sector unions that he's been trying to bust, and he's constantly using union busting language. Oh, they busted all the protests, yeah, blah, blah. The unions are becoming incredibly valuable. So are the journalists. Like, we have to fight this because it's not even subtle anymore, to Mark's point, Keith. The fake veneer of folksy for the people is gone. They're not even trying anymore. They're going full hog.
Oh, come on. He cut the gas tax, didn't he? I mean, it was...
License plate bumper stickers. I saved a couple $100. You're right.
Yeah.
And as I drive by the 2,000 people in Hamilton who are living on the streets as the weather plummets this weekend, I'm going to thank him that I didn't have to pay for a fucking sticker on my license plate. Like, it's disgusting.
These tent cities, tent dwellings, these encampments that are being set up everywhere in every community, they're shameful. They're just, as you say, they're shameless, it seems. And I know that's the Steve Bannon playbook for political right-wing nuts. Just be shameless, own your craziness. But do we not have shame? Do we not have compassion? Hamilton Mountain was wartime housing. After the war, they just went and built.
My first house was one of those wartime houses. A concession.
They were meant to be a first house. Some families stayed in them for generations because they ended up being really nice neighborhoods. But they were built with a purpose. We knew that these soldiers, all these people, we were going to need them. There was going to be a baby boom. It was all predictable. Right. Well, so was this. This has been predictable. We've been dealing with it. What we're seeing in the streets now, we saw it first on the streets in Toronto. and in Allen Gardens. And it starts spreading all over. It's in Hamilton. It's in Sault Ste. Marie. What? This, again, was predictable, and we didn't, the people that work on the streets, they were advising us what to do. We've seen in so many other countries, for God's sakes, Texas is giving people homes and getting them off the street, and it's a hell of a lot less than paying for them when they show up at the emergency department every couple of days. And we haven't even talked about emergency departments not being reliable anymore across Ontario.
I mean, and that's on the other Oshow. We talked about it, but one of the hospitals in Toronto is literally bringing in like trailers from trucks, stacking them up and letting their homeless population who's always in the ER live there so they can meet their needs and save a fortune, right? Like the hospital networks are having to do the work that this premier doesn't have the heart to do. And all of us are having to do what we can. And we have a premier who is attacking teachers, who is attacking nurses, right? Who is just I mean, if you're going after teachers and nurses, if you're vilifying and demonizing the very caregivers in our society, what does it say about the heart that beats in your chest, right? Nothing good. And I don't think there's a person in Ontario who's going to fall for that bullshit anymore. Ford doesn't care. If Ford cared, he could do so. We've come up with more policy suggestions and solutions in our rant show in the last 10 minutes, gentlemen, than they've ever even suggested to meet any of these things. So let me end on this. What do you think is coming up next when it comes to Greenbelt, Ontario Place? Let's just lump the scandals. Let's just call it the corrupt Ford government scandal, because I think that's where we are. What do you think is coming? And also, do you think that these, I was going to call them charlatans. I don't know what to call them. Do you think that this government is going to make it the 3 years, or are the people of Ontario, I saw that line, let them eat concrete, as a way of summing up the way that this government, it's like let them eat cake from the French Revolution, the way they're treating the proletariat, the people. Do you think they're going to make it the 3 years, or are we just going to lose our collective shit? I'll go to you, Mark, and then we'll end with Keith.
3 years is a long time. I don't think we will see them leave early. I don't think they'll call an election early. They have they're so, the polls are looking so bad for them, and they keep going down and down, and Ford's popularity rating. Sure. So we aren't going to see them trigger an election early anytime soon. I'm not sure that the urban boundary expansion issue will garner the same level of protest and, unified provincial outrage, people calling their MPP, like, Keith suggested a couple of weeks ago, that kind of level, they're not going to experience that like they did before the mea culpa. So I'm concerned about that. And that's why I suggest that, the municipalities stand up for themselves, stand up and say no, and build the homes, proceed with building homes that you plan in the built up areas. Just ignore the castle owners and the
feudal lords. Yes,
just ignore them and don't give them permission. Don't start any prep work or any any planning work on their properties. And then when the time comes, another government can be in place and can say no, that urban boundary is.
I think that's wise. I think that's why, and we know that one city councillor quit before the last election because of the bullying in the planning department from developers, right? So Hamilton, if you're going to fight these developers, you got to fight them united, because they are tough. I've had my go-rounds with some of them over the years, personally, over drinks. And these guys don't respond to anything other than strength. So, if Mayor Horvath's going to put out a tweet like yesterday and I'm going to blow it up, keep on that track. Don't sneak back and think you can work it all out nicey. It's not going to work like that. Keith, last comments to you.
Well, I think Doug Ford still feels the ends justify the means, which he freely admitted before he reversed himself on the Greenbelt. I know we were flawed, but the ends justify the. I think he still firmly believes that. And so hence he's not going anywhere before the 2026 election, unless, of course, the PC caucus develops a spine and says, you're just too much of a millstone around our neck. You, Doug Ford, are the unpopular brand, not the PC Party of Ontario. You. Now, if it turns out that
comes out on his cell phones too, right? The privacy report.
I think the reason they took so long to respond on the cell phones, I think they found their little nugget of defense, which is that if you're a constituent asking the premier something, that's not FOIable.
Mm.
Yeah.
So they can say, well, how do I know if it's a constituent calling or it's just someone who's got? So this is their defense. It's lame.
Yeah.
The whole cell phone business, personal use of it, is not. I don't think it captures the public's imagination the way it does a lot of us or the journalists. But it's still, it may seem like small ball, but it's important. It gets to something really core in this. So I think we just keep an eye on that. I think Greenbelt 2.0 is going to keep hammering away at these guys. And of course, hanging in the background of all of this, as we know, sitting on their horse is the Mounties. So until we hear definitively one way or the other from the RCMP on whether the file given to them by the OPP is going to launch an actual investigation, this is going to just be hanging over Doug Ford and his caucus until at least that time. And I think depending on when that is, there'll still be so many other details rolling out from all these shady, who are these third parties that requested these MZOs and got, boundaries changed against political wishes. All that's still to come. The details may get a bit much for most of the public, but the overall stench, people understand it.
And I have to give credit to Merritt Stiles and Mike Schreiner and the Liberal Party interim leader who have been pushing hard. And they are really stepping up. It's been impressive to see what they're coming out with. I'm going to invite all of the Liberal leadership candidates to do an Oshow before the leadership is decided in December, because I want to know how they're going to push back against Ford. I think people in Ontario want to know that too. They want a Liberal leader who's going to be in there, who's going to join the fight and rout out this corruption. So I'm interested to hear from them what that's going to look like. But
there was one line from Calandra. I don't know if you heard it this week. Taking a shot at Bonnie Crombie. She's the only one that still wants to build on the Greenbelt.
Well, you know what? A lot of Oshow viewers want me to ask her about her development support as well and her ties. And I'll ask that of all of them, because to your point, Keith, what is the connective tissue of all of this? It is preferential treatment for the elites. That cell phone and who's calling and who's running the Premier's office is something that the people of Ontario want to know now. Whether the RCMP does it or legislative investigations or journalistic investigations. And I agree with you, Ford's brand is beyond toxic and he's not going to be useful forever to the caucus. And if I were MPP sitting down at the Thanksgiving turkey dinner, I'd be wondering how long I'd want to stand next to that with all of the revelations that are still to come. We'll keep coming back to you guys because you are an awesome Greenbelt Scandal panel, because what the scandal was so big and so long, we're going to need to keep you guys around as regulars here on the O Show. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, Keith, Leslie, Mark Cripps, and for all of you who are watching and our audience is building, it's crazy awesome because we're all in this together. We are in this together. It doesn't matter if you're left, right, or centrist. When you're fighting corruption, you've got to be in it together because it hurts all of us. So thank you for watching. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Please subscribe and we'll have more great programming for you. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.